Okay, so the next thing to look is practice. It is, you know, what happened in practice in these various countries. And I think probably the most relevant thing, or the most illuminating things, is to see what is being done. And in France, they call it the projet urbain, the urban project. And I think that's probably what summarizes what we do. It's an urban project. Now, the expression of that can be in different forms, can be either through a master plan or through a regeneration scheme or whatever different form it is. But it is the urban project. In America, it's becoming quite strongly codified. So it's what they call the form-based codes. And they're using that more and more. And in Germany and in a number of other plans using other countries using different words, it's the Bebauungsplan, and Kat is going to say a few more words about that, I think, so I'm not going to elaborate. But the way that it works, I mean, what they do, what the urban designers do, it can be new cities, huge in the case of China, or very small in other cases, but you know, in China they're designing cities for 3 million people. Or urban extensions, and that's the case in a lot of European countries, or regeneration, as is the case here mostly, actually. Urban extensions here as well, but in most cases they are housing development, housing estates. So, who are the clients of these schemes? And that's quite interesting. In a lot of countries, the client are international firms, and that applies to the Middle East, to Egypt, to Morocco, to China in some cases, I believe as well, India. Outside of Europe, I would say, I mean, certainly in South America, a lot of countries, it's international firms that want to develop huge development, or well, large developments anyway. And they employ international urban designers, and they employ perhaps some of you. You get jobs in a number of countries, mostly in the Middle or Far East. Then there's the local authorities. The local authorities mostly employ local people, and but some do also invite through competitions, invite people from abroad. Certainly in Europe, because of the European law, any tender has to be open to anybody in Europe. So you know, you can get jobs from local authorities that have been advertised and have been obtained by British firms, as I know a few examples. And then you have the local communities, or groups that are working with local communities, and I will say a few more words about that. But they are the exception, I would say, in terms of urban design firms. But they do exist. Now, what this means is that there are various tiers of work and of glamour-related and fee-related and so on in the work of urban designers. If you work for international consortia, big fees, big bucks. But if you work for local communities, you're probably working for nothing. So that's the situation. You know, if you look at the world at the moment. And what you will see a lot is that the international consortia and the international firms are working on international gated communities. And what is significant is that they all look alike. Whether they are, it doesn't matter where they are. You know, it's a pattern that, yeah, where are these things? You can't even tell the scale, but they basically all have golf courses, all have lakes, all have sort of wiggly streets, and all have gates, of course. And they can be absolutely enormous. This is thousands and thousands of people. It's in Argentina. That one is in Egypt, I think. I forget myself. And this one is in China. So, you know, whether you're a communist country or not doesn't make actually any difference at all. But, you know, you have to ask yourselves whether that's the future, you know, from all sorts of points of view. Another type of schemes that is quite ubiquitous and also can be similar, but there are more differences, I think, there, are the schemes for regeneration. The regeneration of docks very often, or industrial wasteland, basically. And they, again, can be done either by local firms or by international ones, quite often by international ones through competitions. And one thing that is attached to a lot of these is branding. And that's another thing that you will see, that quite a few cities have big urban design schemes, mostly regeneration, not urban extension and rarely new cities, because they want to rebrand themselves. And that was the case with Malmö up there. It was the case with Amsterdam, but I haven't got an image of, no, Rotterdam, sorry. It's the case of New Zealand and Australia down there as well. This is a scheme in Milan, and that was not just for branding. It was genuine regeneration of an industrial part of Milan. But I think there's a strong correlation between the work of urban designers in regeneration and branding. Okay. The third one is urban extensions, and that's also all over the world, I would say. Although, yeah, perhaps more in America and Europe than in other countries. So here we have France, Spain, and Germany, 3 examples of urban extensions. I would say a few more words on the form in a minute, but what a few of my contributors, particularly in the developing world or the emerging countries, ask is, well, okay, we do all this work, but where are the Indians? Where's the local population? How are they involved in this? And the truth is that very often they're not, and the whole thing bypasses them completely. And this is an example that tried to integrate by creating a public space in Mumbai, create a public space where everybody could mingle, including the people who lived in the shanties, in the slums in Mumbai. But that, I think, is a question that is quite important. I mean, we tend to publish in our own magazine the glamorous bits. Okay, so in some countries, and I think that's quite interesting, that 2 of the contributors did not follow the pattern of the others, but wrote about schemes that involve local people, and they were not particularly glamorous, perhaps, although there's a bit of technology there. But they were working to improve the lot of the people in the shanties. One in South Africa and one in Brazil. Totally different type of work, but also done by professional urban designers, very involved with the local community. I don't know who paid them, and I don't know how they achieve this, but a lot of work, a lot of hard work with the local community. So I think that's quite an important message, and in a way I wish that I had more of that. But my choice of countries and my choice of chapters was very serendipitous. It wasn't very academically rational. Okay, then finally, one question that I ask myself is, we have a language. We have developed a language in urban design, and we all know what we're talking about. We use all these words. And I thought, well, is that true everywhere else? I mean, are they also talking about legibility, permeability, and so on and so forth? Do they all look like cookie cutters, perimeter blocks, that all the master plans look a bit the same, and so on and so forth? And the fact is, no, not always. Some cases, yes. And again, mostly in the Anglo-Saxon world, that has followed the same pattern. But in other countries, it's not so. And so you have... again, one image that doesn't want to appear. You have things in some countries that don't follow the perimeter block at all, and don't necessarily understand this concept of permeability and legibility in the same way as we do, and particularly they have a different idea about private and public space, which in Anglo-Saxon countries is something very, very protected and very distinctive. Spain and Italy, not at all. I mean, that's highly influenced by modernism still, and this is a completely different approach to an urban extension that what we would have. And I can't remember what the other one was, but again, it wasn't a similar pattern as ours. So not everybody follows the same models. And finally, we also rely very much on heritage, and some countries, of course, do. And there's a whole question of integration of new and old, and so on and so forth. Which in some countries is still very strong, and in other countries it's not strong at all. Chinese don't give a damn about old buildings. They will build old buildings new, but they won't necessarily preserve old buildings. They will have a new quarter which is old, but has been built yesterday. And the Indians have other problems. And basically, they're not very strong on heritage either, and a number of other countries follow the same pattern. In fact, emerging countries are less worried about their heritage than old European countries. So again, it's quite a big difference between what happens here. So I think one more element. I also ask what these various countries did about sustainability. And again, it's very uneven. And as you would expect, northern countries, Nordic countries, North European countries are pretty strong on sustainability, others much less, and the emerging countries even less. Interestingly, that image there is from America. And the fact that you have a piece of public transport is outside of New York City is quite miraculous. But there are occasional cases when they are trying to introduce other forms of transport. But that is, I think, in terms of the future, I think is one where there's more work to do than anything else is on sustainability everywhere, basically. So the future is complicated, I would say, but the future is there. And I'll stop here, and I'll ask Katja to say a few words about Germany. I think there you are.